Hello, and welcome to another Industry Careers for PhDs podcast brought to you by Cheeky Scientist. I'm your host, Isaiah Henkel. If you want to listen to the full version of this interview, make sure you check out our association. All of our associates get access to all the behind the scenes information, the highlights, the background materials, the show notes, as well as a first version of this, which we usually do live. You can check this out at cheekyscientist.com/association. If you want to have these highlights, though, delivered to your inbox every week, you can go to our website at cheekyscientist.com and subscribe under where it says Start Here. Today we have on with us Coyte Cooper. Very excited to have him on, and today he's going to be talking about professional branding for PhDs. Dr. Cooper is an author, and he is a professional business coach and a speaker, and he focuses on helping people achieve their professional aspirations by branding themselves in a new way according to wherever their career is taking them, what their career goals are. Now, he recently released his first book, Impressions, The Power of Personal Branding in Living an Extraordinary Life, which is available on Amazon and other outlets. And he has founded the Impressions 28-Day Growth Challenge. He's worked with thousands of people all over the world. He has his own podcast called Earn the Right to Live Your Dreams. He does have a PhD as well, so he knows intimately what it takes for a PhD to rebrand themselves as a career professional in a field. So we're really looking forward to talking with him today, and we're going to jump in with Coyte Cooper now.
Very excited to have you on today. Coyte, thanks for being here with us.
Thanks so much for having me, man. I love doing this, so the opportunity is just great. Thank you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So Coyte, thanks again for being on with us. I think you're in a very unique position where you have your PhD, you've worked in these different types of industries, and so you can really articulate to this audience specifically what it means to develop a personal brand, or what is a personal brand, and maybe we can just start there. Maybe you could just tell us, from your point of view, what a personal brand is.
Yeah, I mean, I like to tell people it's at a basic level, it's your reputation, and it's the perceptions of other people have of you. And I tell people there's two different types of ways that you interact with people. There's direct and there's indirect. And the direct is every single day you interact with people, and that's your colleagues, that's your coworkers, that might be a potential employer. And people don't walk around and meet you and then go, oh, this person's personal brand is this. But what they do is this, is they come and they interact with you, and intuitively, they think about those things. It just kind of goes in, and eventually all these assessments start to add up, and it becomes your brand. And the crazy thing for me when I've worked with people is most people never think about the fact that they already have a personal brand. You already have one. You have one. If you have a husband or wife, you've got one with your partner. You've got it with your colleagues. You've got it with potential employers. You just didn't know that. And what I always teach people is that you want to take control of that. You want to make sure that you're intentional about who you want to be. And so there's that direct part, and there's also an indirect. And what that is that's a lot of this professional. When you're putting out resumes, when you're putting out materials for jobs, and or you're developing a website, that stuff matters as well. And you have to be intentional about what type of message you want to send out there. And when you do these things well, and I've worked with people who do, when they know what they want their personal brand to be, and they take advantage of direct and indirect interactions, and they just do that on a daily basis, then they have a chance to build a really unique personal brand. And I'm fortunate that I get to work with young professionals, and also coaches in this role. And it's really neat to see once they understand they have a brand and they can control it, it's a really good thing. And I always tell people what your job is to just really make positive impressions on people, to have that wow factor when people interact with you, that they want to tell other people about that. That's word of mouth marketing, and that's all a part of personal branding. So I could keep talking about this, but in essence, what it is it's the perceptions people have of you. And when those are good, then you're going to have opportunities. When they're not, then you're not. And when they're neutral, I always tell people neutral is the same as bad to me. You're not doing anything to really push yourself forward.
No, that's great. And so just to key on a couple of things you said, I would say in short, your personal brand, you guys, like Coyte just said, it's the perception that other people have of you. And you can take control of this by being intentional. And this is something that we've talked about extensively, right? In terms of transitioning in industry, you have to take control of your personal brand via LinkedIn, via your in-person interactions with people. Just to get super practical, like the headline of yourself, the picture in LinkedIn, even in your resumes, taking control of that brand and really controlling what the perception is and having people perceive you as a, like we say, a confident and successful industry professional instead of another academic or, an academic-minded person who can't handle working in industry. So that's great, Coyte. Thanks. So moving on from there, and to keep going with getting really practical for the audience here, how does a personal brand? How can it, just maybe some examples of how can it lead to new job opportunities? So we have people that have spent, for the majority of them, have spent their entire lives in academia. They're trying to transition to this completely new world where they need to rebrand themselves again as a successful industry professional. So how can they use their personal brand to get a job, and why should PhDs care about personal branding?
Well, I think everybody should care about it. And I'm always amazed that, I work in academia, at least I'm going to be until the end of this year, and how few people actually do pay attention to that. And I think that's turning. Even at the University of North Carolina, my future dean is now, he got the job. And one of the reasons he got the job is he's talking about branding. And I think it's really critical, because new jobs, how does it relate to that? When the quality of your materials stick out, you give yourself a better chance of getting a job. And I can't be sure that that's the case in every industry, but if you put together a resume that is extremely well done, and I tell people maybe this is doing something with Adobe InDesign where it's unique and it's different, the message that you're sending is that you're unique and different. And so that's the first way you do it, is all the materials that you put out, make sure that you're putting out things that represent you. And when I talk about personal branding, if what you want is your future employer to think innovation, to think creativity, then all of your marketing materials should relate to that. But there's probably nothing more important than the way that you interact with people. Because if you interact with people the right way, you know your values, you live those the right way, you connect with people on a regular basis. I mean, those are a lot of the times the people that are advancing. They're the ones who have multiple people who are out saying this person's outstanding. Like you want to get those opportunities. But the hard part is when you're moving into a new industry, you're maybe not necessarily meeting those people. And so that's where those indirect, like you're saying, what you're doing on LinkedIn, what you're doing on social media, the materials you're putting together are really important, because sometimes you only get one chance to make an impression. If it's a future boss or something like that, maybe they go to your LinkedIn profile, maybe they go to your website, and you want to make sure when they go there, they say, wow, this person has it together. I can tell, they're a certain type of person, and that's the type that we want to be a part of our, whatever your company or whatever initiative you have.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. So just to recap there, you guys, I mean, lots of great information here. In terms, let's make it practical, in terms of your resumes, and we talk a lot about this, and those of you who have gone through resume workshops and stuff, most people have, most PhDs turn in like a 4-page resume, very cluttered. They change the margins so they can fit in more material, very dense text, looks sloppy, cluttered, and that's the brand you're giving off. If all they see is your resume, they're going to see you as a cluttered person if your resume is cluttered. But if you make it clear and simple and lots of white space, bullet points, talking about results, basically communicating that you are ready to transition into industry, that's how they're going to see you. That's going to be their perception. That's going to be your brand. And then especially in networking, I'm really glad, Coyte, you brought that up, because interacting with other people, I mean, every interaction that you have, you're going to leave that impression, and it's going to link to your personal brand. So are you going to networking events, and are you the awkward academic in the corner hanging out by the plant while everybody else is talking? Or are you meeting other people and acting again like a confident and successful industry professional? Or what brand are you communicating? So I think that's very helpful. I guess, okay, so we have a lot of people that maybe the idea of branding yourself professionally or personally is very new, right? There was a time even when it was new to me, and I'm sure new to you. So how did you go about discovering your personal brand? How can PhDs, people listening, what are some practical steps they could take to really defining themselves and figuring out what their professional brand is?
Yeah, and I may have a different approach to this, and because one of the things that I believe it ties back to your values and what you believe in. And I think one of the best ways to know your brand is to take the time to get to know yourself. And investing in personal growth, even me as a young scholar in academia, one of the best things that I did was to invest in personal growth. And I'm not talking about reading academic papers. That's not what helped me grow. What helped me grow was reading books on personal development, reading on vision, reading about values. Because when I read those books, I started to think about, what do I want to be known as? What is the type of person I want to be? That's what personal branding is. What do you want people to think when they interact with you? And the only way that you can really do this is by taking that time to reflect, thinking about the people that you want to make impressions on. And that's a marketing thing. That's when you break down segments and thinking about that. But ultimately what it comes down to is knowing your vision, what you want to achieve, and your values. Because if you know your values, you know the things that matter to you most. And when I say values, these are the attributes. For me, my top value is adding value. It's about energy. Like everything that I do, I want people to think that. And so once you know your values, you come up on a term called authenticity. And you've heard that a lot. It's a key term in branding. That authentic means that the things that you're saying, the things that you believe in are matching up with the things that you're doing on a regular basis. And as a leader and as a professional, this may be one of the most important things that you have, is having that authenticity. It's extremely rare in our society because most people are trying to be everybody else. They're trying to be something they're not. And the best thing that you can do is learn the things that truly matter to you and then get out and model them. And I tell people this, be that. It doesn't, if you go into a job and you're trying to be something you're not, like a job interview, and you're trying to be something you're not, you might get the job, but you're probably going to end up in the wrong environment. So, just really think about that. And the best thing, again, the end that I tell people, what do you want people to think? We've said that already. What do you want your legacy to be? When you get to the end of your work career in your life, what do you want people to think? And if you can backtrack that to how you live on a daily basis, that's how you develop a personal brand.
No, that's great. So lots of information here, guys, and it's very relevant. And again, this is coming from a PhD. This is not coming from, some guru that's trying to sell you balloons. So I would really listen carefully to the concrete takeaways here. And we heard a term like values, right? So you might be thinking, okay, values, why does this matter? If you look, all the companies you guys want to work for, it doesn't matter if it's Baxter, Pfizer, whoever it is, on their webpage somewhere, they're going to have, their mission statement and their values. And they're going to have their culture, right? All of these things make up their brand, their professional brand. And if you can match your brand to their brand, or at least find the common threads during an interview, for example, it's going to be very helpful. But you need to understand, what your values are and communicate those, right? Whether, in simple terms, it could be that you're innovative or you're hardworking, like Coyte said, energetic, good communicator, these kind of things. That's very important. Authenticity, clearly important. We talked about this in a simple, practical example with recruiters. If you're talking to a recruiter, don't try to fake like you've actually had industry experience when you haven't, right? A lot of academics do this. Instead, just be like, I've been in academia my whole life. I'm looking to get into an entry-level position where I can start my career and make something happen. Work to turn knowledge into a product, these kind of things. So authenticity, crucial too. And then Coyte brought up legacy. And you might be like, okay, legacy is kind of a heavy topic, right, for a Thursday morning. But really, you got to be thinking about your career in advance. And in your transition plan, you talk about figuring out that lifestyle you want to have, even 5 to 10 years from now, and then finding a career that fits that lifestyle. So be thinking far in advance. Where do you want to end up? Where do you want your career to take you, and have that kind of long-term mindset. So all important stuff for personal and professional branding, and great stuff, Coyte. Thanks. So you define your brand, and maybe a lot of you that are listening, you're realizing, well, I have clearly this academic brand. We know what the PhD brand is, whatever it is. People in like tweed sport coats with patches on the elbows, whatever it might be, right? This is how a lot of people might see PhDs. So how do you change this? How do you change your brand? Like maybe you know what your brand is now. What are some steps to take practically? And I know you talked about some of them, whether it's just changing your values, whatever else, but what other strategies do you have for that, Coyte?
Yeah, and the first thing I would say is this is something that I've struggled with professionally, and in my life, is that I know the values that I have, and yet in academia, it can be hard to model that. Academia is such an interesting place to work in, where, I feel like some of the people I work around are maybe more negative, and you're not, I'm a positive person. One of my brands is energy, being positive. And what I've had to learn is that I don't want to be a different person in different places. And that doesn't mean you're not a little bit more goofy with your wife or your partner, but when it comes to work and at home, I want to have the same values. I want to be a high energy person. I want to add value to people. That the innovation, those things, I want to do it all the time. So the first thing I would say is that pick things that allows you to be the same person all the time. It'll be far less exhausting. Your authenticity will be easier. But how do you change your personal brand? Most people that I've worked with before, when you actually sit down and you say, how do you feel? If you have a brand with your colleagues, your wife, your kids, whoever it is, the most important people in your life, how would you feel about that? Most people will actually take a step back and go, I don't know if I like that. I don't think I like that. Maybe I've been not very patient, or I'm not doing the right things. And the first thing I would say is to take a step back and know that you can change your brand. And this is the same concept of, we're talking professional sport organizations have to do this all the time. You have mistakes that are made. You have to rebrand. You have a new owner. Companies do this as well. It's a term, that you can do that. But here's the hard part, right? That if you have neglected people, or you've treated them wrong, or you've been a jerk, or whatever it is, whatever you feel like you've fallen short, it can take time to rebuild that. But if you're consistent about the person that you want to be, that you want to be, you want people to think of you being creative or outgoing or whatever it is, that you just have to be really consistent with modeling it. And one of the ways that I held myself accountable is once I've researched and I know my values, I look at them every single morning. And when I'm approaching a tough decision or looking for a job or a career decision, which I'm doing right now, and walking away from the University of North Carolina, I do that by asking my values. Like, what do I want to achieve with my career and my life on a day-to-day basis? And my values guide all my decisions. And the cool thing is when I've gotten better at modeling this, because that's a term as well for authenticity, is modeling your values every single day. When you get that right, what should happen is if you were to go talk to my students right now and you ask them, what would you say about Dr. Cooper? I hope that they would tell you the same things that I'm saying. If you went and you talked to my wife, same thing. You went and talked to the people I work with professionally, I hope they would say the same thing. So consistency there, understanding that you can change your brand. It can be what you want it to be, but you have to be willing to work your butt off to model it. And then you have to be bold enough when there's people around you who are opposite and they're trying to get you to settle in and be something else. You got to step up and be what you want to be. And that's one of the most important things when it comes to changing your brand.
No, so I really like that. And again, just to kind of consolidate all this information, being consistent, being authentic, these kind of things, it's not about saying, okay, I'm going to be a completely different person, something that doesn't make me feel aligned. I'm going to be really, I'm going to try to be somebody else, when you go on a job interview, whatever that is. It's not about that. You have to do the groundwork first, and you actually have to become this different person. And sure, there might be a little bit of faking it before you make it. You might need to practice some new values, which we talked about before, but eventually you'll become that. And being the same person, being consistent, it is much easier. It doesn't take as much energy. And a lot of you guys know this. Like, you have gone out and started executing your networking strategy, and slowly over time, networking has become easier because you've made it a top value. We talked about how in academia, your values are publications or getting grants or whatever they might be. And if you want to get into industry, you have to change those values or add to those values, add to your priorities, right? So values, priorities, very similar. And so if you add some new priorities like communication, networking, even confidence, right? Getting the confidence back that your PhD matters, that you can be successful in industry, that these things will change your brand, and your values are what are going to guide that, like Cooper said. So a really good way to see how other people see you, I love this, and I'm really glad you brought it up, Coyte, is to ask them, right? There's a lot of different things that you can, there's a lot of different ways to do this. I've heard a lot of them, Coyte, maybe you can mention some in a second, but just ask the people that are close to you, whether it is a relationship partner, friends, colleagues, whatever it is. Ask them a simple question, what do you see as my biggest strengths? What do you see as my biggest weaknesses? And when you ask this, you have to really do it obviously very sincerely, and you really have to let the person know it's okay to tell you what your biggest weakness is. Like, you're not going to get angry, right? Mm-hmm. So ask this, get that feedback, and you'll start to see what your current brand is, and maybe how you need to change your values, priorities in order to change it. Anything to comment on that, Coyte?
But I think you're spot on with the part where it says asking people, people that are within close proximity to you. And you have to set that up right. Because if you're not a very open person, most people are not going to be comfortable telling you. And most people avoid that period. They don't really want to give feedback because they're afraid of getting into conflict. And so you have to go to somebody and have the right intentions in mind. You have to tell them, like, I will get mad. I'm really trying to be better. Let me know, what do you think of? And so that's important. One thing one of my colleagues does here, she has like a 360 degree, assessment that we do with our grad students, and they have all the other grad students do this anonymously. So, there's some of that. And what I always do is I start closest to home, with my wife, who spends all of her time with me. I tell her all the time, you've got to tell me if I'm not being straight, if I'm not doing these things, you need to be the first to tell me, because the last thing I would want is for other people to be thinking something different and have me be off base, because that's really when I'm going to struggle. I'm not going to have opportunities that are going to be opening up if I'm saying I'm one thing and I'm the opposite. So I think, like what you're saying, just being open to that, and that's a hard thing, right? I mean, nobody really likes to have somebody tell them you're a jerk or you stink at what you do. That's not fun. But it's worse? Not knowing that you're a jerk and you stink at your job and going through your whole life thinking that, because then you don't have positive relationships with anybody. So I would just assume have somebody tell me and go into that rebranding process. But again, if you're going into it with fake, like you're for the wrong intentions, you're going to struggle. You have to want to draw back, look at the values, and want to get it right. And somebody just posted core priorities, right? Yeah, I mean, you have to find your core priorities, and that's exactly right. Hopefully, I say it right. It's Duran, but you have to know that. I mean, you have to know what you're about. And if you can draw back and know those things, your core priorities, your core values, and you know what you're about, man, life is so much better. It's so much easier to know the person you want to be and then go start doing it. And then there's a part where you have to stop worrying about what everybody else thinks. I'm not saying being rude, but once you know your values and you have the right values that are designed to help other people, sometimes people, when you have big aspirations, are not going to like you. They're going to criticize you, and you have to be okay with that. So there's that balance of those things.
No, and I like that. And the more you know who you are and really what your brand is, the less it'll bother you when people don't like you. But again, to make this stuff super practical, I mean, you guys want to know how you are coming off to people you're networking with. How are you coming off to them, even online, to interviewers? And the best way to find out is to, get a focus group, which would be the people that are, your colleagues, friends, family. Ask for feedback. When you do mock interviews, ask for feedback at how you come off. And you guys know the statistics, right? I mean, same with your resume. 5 to 7 seconds is all that people are spending on it. In most cases, during interviews, they're going to decide within the first 90 seconds if they want to move you on in the interviewing process. So make sure that you're asking for feedback, getting that information, because it'll really help you. Moving on, and to continue to get it more practical, so we can actually apply to some of this stuff. I'd like to talk a little bit about how you can use your professional brand or your personal brand when reaching out to connections on LinkedIn, or just LinkedIn as a whole. How can you communicate your brand on LinkedIn? I know you know a lot about this, Coyte, and then especially when reaching out to new industry professionals, introductions, these kind of things, any kind of tips and strategies there.
Well, I think the first thing is if you're out and you're interacting with people, this is not rocket science. Most of you know this, but I mean, when you interact with somebody and you go and you watch a talk and somebody does a great job, I mean, it's a natural path to be able to go and connect with them. And the most important thing that you can do is don't just write them and go, oh yeah, I like the talk. Can you help me with this? No, you write them and you say, thank you so much. I specifically enjoyed this part of your talk. It's impacted my life. And ask people, let me know if there's anything I can ever do to help you. Start with that. I mean, a lot of your top people who are training people will tell you that the worst thing you can do is go, oh, you write somebody you don't know and say, hey, can you help me with this? People are going to ignore you. So, try to reach out and add value, try to create an authentic connection. And the best way to do that is if you have any interaction with anybody, and it doesn't matter who you're interacting with, you can interact with the best people in your industry. And most people appreciate it when you were right and say, man, it really impacted me. Thank you so much. And so that's important. But I always say this too, when you're even writing, you think about how you want to come across. Like, is there any humor at all? Most people say no in a professional thing, but I have no problem with, and maybe I'm just different this way, but having a little humor, if there was something funny that happened during the talk, but just constantly think about ways that you connect and show your personality in your messages. And that's sort of a hard thing. In academia, you're sort of taught to just write these articles that are really hard for pretty much anybody to understand. And so, transitioning out, I think an important part is being able to connect with people. And I know I wasn't taught that with my PhD. And so it's this process of where you're changing, where I think in academia, a lot of the time you're taught it's a selfish thing, publish for yourself, and now what you're changing to do, you have to think about adding value to others, because that's what will help you advance. And then I just think when you're using social media, period, not just LinkedIn, but I know Twitter, I've been able to connect with people really well professionally, at least initial conversations. It's always put out things that support your personal brand. I don't know how many people actually have a brand that they want to model, and then they go on social media and they're complaining about things, and they're saying crazy things, and they're retweeting crazy things. Like, don't do that. You have to assume that people are going to look at that, and what you want is consistency. Your social media, your LinkedIn, your Twitter, everything should represent the person that you are, and just always assume people are going to look, because they will. And even with our grad program, that's what we do. I've heard professionals for professional sport teams do the same thing. Businesses are doing the same thing. So always represent yourself the same way. And here's what I know most good companies want. You want to work for a company like Zappos, which is a $1 billion company, one of the best in customer service in the world. They like energy. They like creativity. They like these things. So show that on your social media. When you're posting things, post things that would align with some of the dream jobs that you want, so you're starting to build for that. So those are just some things I think of off the top of my head.
No, that's really useful. And I'm really happy that you dove into adding value, because, you guys, we talk about that a lot when you reach out on LinkedIn. Obviously, we've done a lot of different workshops, and people before you come into the association, PhD, a lot of PhDs, they just send out messages that either ask for something right away, like, hi, I don't know you, please connect with me, and hey, I see you work here, I want to get a job there, I'd be perfect for it, give me a job. And, then you get no response, and you wonder why. And then you reach out without having your house in order, like we talk about. You don't have your LinkedIn profile set up so that when they see who this person is, it's a picture, it's a non-professional picture of you. It's not a picture that shows, the brand of an industry professional, but it shows the brand of an academic or somebody who doesn't care. So all these kind of things are really important. And I think the authenticity part of adding value is important. Reaching out and not just saying something simple like, hey, I want to, I really liked your article. Thanks. I hope we can connect, just something that is really robotic, but instead really kind of digging in, being a little bit personable. I mean, humor is a good way to do that, like Coyte said, and adding value, just being really appreciative and personable, and adding value that way, and going for the long-term relationship like we talked about. Very, very crucial. And so again, I really like the idea of what Coyte said too, of just aligning everything, right? So what you communicate constantly online, your personal Facebook account, your personal Twitter account, LinkedIn, everything that you're doing needs to align with the industry position you want to get. Okay, so you want to be an MSL, right? You want to be a research scientist in industry. Start talking and communicating like that. Focus on that. Start talking about industry trends. Start connecting with people that are talking about industry trends. You want to work for a specific company? Find out what their culture is. Like we always use the example of, how different this can be. Pfizer is diversity, Baxter's innovation. Okay, you want to work at Pfizer? Start communicating things that show that you value diversity, right? Start talking about this kind of stuff and aligning your messaging with the company's messaging, or at least with, industry's messaging overall. I think those are huge tips. So that's great stuff, Cooper.
Thank you for joining us for another Industry Careers for PhDs podcast. If you're interested in attending one of these interviews live, or if you're interested in getting access to the full interview, including all of the background materials and show notes, go to cheekyscientist.com/association and learn how to become an associate. You can get on the wait list for the next association enrollment period there and learn full details about the program. It's a program specifically designed to help PhDs transition into top industry positions. If you would like to receive more of these interview highlights via our podcast, sent directly to your email, go to cheekyscientist.com and email subscribe under where it says start here. If you haven't already, you can also subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. Until next week, remember your value as a PhD and start thinking and acting like a successful industry professional.